Here. Kevin Elway.
Here.
Jeff Caters.
Here.
Ryan Padani.
Here.
Josh Anton.
Here.
Pat Antonin.
Here.
Lenny Austin.
Here.
Julie Brasted. Here. Jim Dickinson.
Here.
Tony Cavay.
Here.
Dan Deno.
Here.
Steve Feldman.
Here.
Chelsea Howell.
Here.
Brad Johnson.
Here.
Amanda Marquez Simila.
Here.
James Mork.
Here.
Robert Nelson. Dave Oswald.
Here.
Eric Peterson.
Here.
Tim Sanders. Scott Schulte.
Here.
Todd Schweiger.
Here.
Brian Werke.
Here.
Brian West. And Charlie Thompson.
Here.
Thank you. Welcome all again for coming. Move on to item number 2 is approval of minutes. Are there any additions, corrections to the minutes? They were attached many in your packet. Anyone want to make any additions or corrections? Okay. Seeing and hearing none, I will, as chair's prerogative, approve the minutes as typed. Move on then to item number 3, treasurer's report. Chief Deputy Hellwick, attachment B in your materials.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For 2022, our total revenues at $1,523,025. Expenditures for total administrative support stood at $151,813. Total systems and maintenance support at $806,584. And total operation expenditures at $1,021,301. I don't have my cheat. Our estimated fund balance, as of June 30th, is at $1,257,240. That concludes my report.
All right, thank you. It looks like we are under our revenue, our expenditures are under revenues by that much. Quite a bit. Okay, any questions about the budget as presented?
Move approval, Mr. Chair.
The motion by Commissioner Schulte, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Chief Swenson. All right, any discussions, questions about it? Okay, Corey, is there anything you want to add to the budget aspect or to the budget versus actual?
Mr. Chair, members of JLAC, obviously, we've been looking at this for the last 2 or 3 meetings. There's been a couple changes that came through in May, but we've had no changes since then. Our overall budget is increasing very, very little. I think what are we at, 1%?
Yeah, we'll get to that actual budget, but how about on this presentation?
Oh, is this the treasury report?
Yeah.
On the treasury's report, yeah, we have 37% remaining. We're 500,000, kind of under budget right now. We expect to close that as we get closer by year end. Obviously, this is June 30th. We still have a half year of expenditures left. So we do expect the administrative support will come closer to being on budget, and we expect that we'll come in still probably under budget a little bit. But yeah, we're fine.
Well, that was good news, under budget. Okay, any other questions, comments? Hearing none, because we do have WebEx members, we are going to do the approval by roll call vote. Once again, John Swenson, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, Kevin Elway.
Yes.
Jeff Caters.
Yes.
Brian Padani.
Yes.
Josh Antoine.
Yes.
Pat Antonin.
Yep.
Lenny Austin.
Yes.
Julie Brasted.
Yes.
Jim Dickinson.
Yes.
Tony Cavay.
Yes.
Dan Deno.
Yes.
Steve Feldman.
Yes.
Chelsea Howell.
Yes.
Brad Johnson.
Yes.
Amanda Marquez Simila. Mayor? Mayor, can you hear us? Anybody see her? She's nodding her head up and down. I'll even take that. Not on screen. All right.
Here, I figured it out. Yes.
Yeah. We're taking a roll call vote on attachment B, which is the treasurer's report, Mayor. Are you in favor of that report or against it?
I'm in favor of the report. Thank you.
James Moore.
Yes.
Robert, no. Bob's not here. Dave Oswald,
Yes.
Eric Peterson,
Yes.
Jim Sanders is here, Scott Schulte.
Yeah, I'm here now. Sanders.
Oh, I hear you. Good. Missed you last time. You want to vote on that one, Jim?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Todd Schweiger,
Yes.
Ryan Werke,
Yes.
and Charlie Thompson.
Yes.
And Brian West does not appear on Anoka Council. Okay. Thank you. Treasurer report is now approved. We'll go to item number 4, which is the budget. As Corey has started to tell you, this is the third meeting in a row that this budget has been in front of you. It is the, we should have had what the attachment is, C. Should be attachment C. And Corey, I will now turn it over to you as the county's finance director. Go ahead.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, JLEC members, the budget has been before you the last 3 meetings. There has been a couple adjustments that came through in May. Nothing has changed since then. We are looking at a 2023 proposed budget of $1.64 million, or 1.06% increase, of about $17,125 increase, mainly in some various support contracts, personal services, and some changes in software licensing. Overall, over the last few years, we've continued to also take a look at our revenues. Our revenues continue to remain very stable. We are predicting they may increase up to 7.5% to 8% in the out years. We never seem to get there. We seem to be able to find ways to curb that each year, but we're trying to go in with eyes wide open. Our overall proposal for revenue increases is 0.8%. This, however, represents a 2.6% increase in the law related to how the formula works. Because remember, we have a super formula, which not only takes calls, which splits the law piece based on the volume of calls to 911. There's also a percent that goes to the county from 911, and then there's a percent that hits the fire department based on the expenditure breakdown. A portion of the expenses are broken down on the super formula. The super formula, which is remains at 31.31% law, 60.58% for the county aided dispatch, and 8.11% for fire. So that has not changed in many, many years. So, but based on that, our revenues are only going to increase very slightly. Overall, the revenues will rise up to 1.535 from $1.523 million. You are seeing a little higher increase in a couple of the areas that will pick that up. And what this does, we are planning to use our reserves. Again, we have planned this year to use about $150,000 in reserves, and probably will not. This will shift again. But if we use our reserves based on the way we predicted, we will drop our reserves to 19.9% by 2026. This year, we are planning to use, let me go to the page. We are planning to use a little over about $105,000 in reserves, is what is budgeted for 2023. We had $100,000 in reserves budgeted for 2022. So, in usage. So overall, there's not that much change. In our budget, we've been able to keep it reasonable, even though we are seeing increased costs in support. So we don't know if we can hold that as we get into 2024. We are starting to see that among the vendors. That is a discussion we'll probably have as we get into the first part of this next year. The other thing I want to bring up is the public safety levy, which is $1.75 million, and has remained that for many, many years. 2023 represents the last year of that levy. If that levy, the JLEC or the county board decide to try to work with the legislature to extend that, they would have to meet and kind of work through that legislative process. Otherwise, it will automatically sunset after 2023. The projects that remain open are the PSDS system project. There is some dollars that are planned to be transferred to reimburse the county for the upfront dollars that they have put in, which go through 2023. Those are in progress. be another lion's share of it. And then we also have some expectation coming up in 2023 to replace the server equipment around the public safety data system. So those are all the projects that are forthcoming that have been approved by JLEC and that are still in progress. So with that, are there any questions on the overall budget or
Any
changes?
questions? Corey, if you could address for some of our newer members here, we talked about reserves. Could you tell us a little bit about what the recommended reserves are for?
Right. What we decided a number of years ago, working through the governance committee, is to try to keep our reserves at no lower than 20% of our expenditures. So we've been buying down our reserves to kind of meet that goal. And that's what you see on the reserve graph. It kind of shows you that our planned usage of reserves over the next 4 years through 2026 would bring it down to about 19.9%, just slightly under the 20%. And that's if we stay on the budget as they're projected. Of course, with these budgets that are projected, right now your revenue increases heading into 2024 would be 3.3%, 2025 would be 8.8%, and 2026 would be 11.7%. That's based on the current budget trajectory, assuming a 3% increase in expenditures over that time period. Obviously, as these things adjust each year, we've been able to avoid huge increases in our overall revenue need every year based on changes, and we'll continue to look at that as we go. And if we come in under budget, that will obviously change the reserve calculation. We'll be able to put more reserves. We'll be able to push out the use of reserves.
Okay. Any questions of Corey? At this time, I entertain a motion to approve the budget as presented.
I move, Mr. Chair.
All right. Mr. Schulte moves. Is there a second?
Mayor Feldman, second.
Second. All right. Further discussion on the budget. We've been working pretty hard on this, and it's kind of part of a long-term plan, as people know. We try not to have any surprises. The reason we do this now is so that cities can, of course, adjust their budget as we go forward. So, okay. Commissioner Schulte.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to make a quick thank you to Anoka County Finance for stepping in and helping us out in this project. I really appreciate their expertise. Not that we don't have a lot of experts in the room that can do this stuff, but it's what they do for a living. Appreciate their help.
Commissioner, any other comments? Anyone? Hearing none, I gotta do a roll call vote. We'll go back down to it. John Swenson.
Yes.
Kevin Elway.
Yes.
Jeff Caters.
Yes.
Brian Padani.
Yes.
Josh Antoine.
Yes.
Pat Antonin.
Yes.
Lenny Austin.
Yes.
Julie Bradsted.
Yes.
Jim Dickinson.
Yep.
Tony Cavani.
Yes.
Dan Deno.
Yes.
Steve Feldman.
Yes.
Carol T. Howell.
Yes.
Brad Johnson.
Yes.
Amada Marquez Simona.
Yes.
James Moore.
Yes.
Yes.
Dave Oswald.
Yes.
Eric Peterson.
Yes.
Tim Sanders.
Yes.
Scott Schulte.
Yes.
Todd
Schweiger.
Yes.
Brian Weerke.
Yes.
And standing Councilman West, but you're on?
Yep, I'm here. Yes.
Here. Yes? Did he say yes?
He said yes.
All right, thank you, I didn't hear it. Okay, Charlie Thompson.
Yes.
Thank you. We are now approved for our budget for next year. Thank you for that. Let's move on to item number 5, which is the committee reports. And Chief Caters, you're going to have yourself A through D. So why don't we start with the governance committee, as you are the new chair, and talk about the public safety data system. Chief Caters, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the governance committee met on July 13th. We had 8 items on the agenda. We went through all those items and added them to today's joint law enforcement agenda. I don't have a lot on that. Received updates from all the entities and what was going on with the budget and so forth. It's kind of a pre-meeting to this meeting, if you will. So we went through that on July 13th. I don't have much more on that.
I might want to add something, Chief.
Yeah, go ahead.
We did have a discussion, we're how many years into our contract with PSDS now, Forest, wherever they're called now. What is it? Central Square, sorry, and they changed name a few times. We're not getting anywhere. I mean, my understanding is those that were at the governance committee, they've been dragging their feet. We've been asking for things, they haven't been delivering, et cetera. We owe them a little money. We have a set off, I understand. Is that correct, Chief? I think we have some money that we get to set off on any final bill. We did come on under budget. It was an $8 million budget. We did come under, so we're in pretty good shape financially as far as that goes. But after hearing from George talk about how we have expected things to get down for about 18 months and they're not doing much. Jason, I don't know if you want to chime in here from anything about that.
That sounds accurate to what we talked about. I mean, the project is kind of stalled out. So the discussion was, should we decide to close the project and continue support or try to keep it open and get somewhere on it?
I think part of the discussion was that I think I'm going to look at Assistant County Attorney in my office to begin, I think, to start having discussions with them about terminating this agreement. It's just hanging out there. Nothing's being done. Isn't a big money thing, but I think we ought to close it out just for purposes. So, won't have anything at this meeting, obviously, but maybe at the next or after that, we'll see what happens. But I think we're going to have to start that discussion unless someone seriously objects to that, which I'm not hearing any as we sit here. We'll try and see what we can come up with to at least have a plan going forward, because the square just not getting it done. You know, we've asked for things, I understand, and they haven't. Commissioner.
And Mr. Chair, it's the perception that it was a failed contract as long as it's still open and not finished, which isn't the case. It had a very successful implementation. It had hiccups. We all went through all the bumps and everything else. But the fact that they can't deliver on these last few deliverables, whether it's NCIS queries or whatever, NCIC, either way, it's become unimportant, and their deliverable is going to be way too long, which in the end will be the public perception that we didn't get what we paid for. So it was the thought of the governance committee that we should ask the county attorney to attempt to close out that contract completely, use them for the contract and maintenance that we had so we can keep the system functioning. But at the same time, there's no sense having an open contract when the deliverables are nowhere in sight.
Exactly right.
I'd just like to add to what Commissioner Felton said. Yeah, it's important to understand that we're not talking about ending the relationship now, it's ending the implementation process.
That's correct.
That's just an important distinction.
Yeah, we will maintain a relationship with them, obviously, it's maintenance, but not the contract, or at least that deliverable. So, unless there's some serious objection by anyone sitting in this room, I think we're going to proceed in that direction. We'll have more information for you later on. Okay, if you could go ahead to B, if you would, Chief Caters.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. The Public Safety Data System Manager's Report. George can't be with us today. He's in training with the Minnesota National Guard. But he did want me to bring up there's an attachment on your agenda that gave an update on several items, but he wanted me to go through at least a few or highlight a few of them. One being the Fire Protection Council. I don't know if that group has met yet already or not.
Tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. Tomorrow evening, they'll meet and consider final approval of the RFP for the new fire record management system. The goal of the RFP is to be released August 1st with a submission due by October 1st. The RFP was developed by a committee led by Jason Nyhart and George, and no additional cost to the Fire Protection Council. Currently 9 vendors that have shown interest in providing a submission for that RFP. Second item was George and Andy Todd from Fridley PD have been working with the city of Fridley as they move forward through the purchase of an online payment system. Focus has been the potential to have administrative tickets and tickets to enforce local ordinances with the ability to pay those online, which is important to some of the cities. The question we worked on is the two-way transfer of data that allows us to indicate if tickets were paid, and then a way to automate the follow-up on the process if they're not. So basically, a way that they could pay these citations online. Item number 3, Bethany continues to develop in her role as a law RMS administrator. She held her first countywide record meeting lead record meeting, so she gets together with all the lead record managers at all the law enforcement agencies and brings back issues and concerns about the public safety data system and how it works with the job that they do. Lowell just completed the, what's called a Nessus scan of the public safety data system. The purpose of the scan is to find potential vulnerabilities within the network to allow the public safety data system to evaluate and mitigate issues that come up. As usual, there's a number of issues that were discovered, and tickets were created in the LOGIS tracking system. So LOGIS, for those that aren't familiar, is Local Government Information System. That's who the JLEC contracts with for network services and security on our IT systems. LOGIS, George and Kevin McNallen have worked to close about 3/4 of those tickets created within the 2 weeks from that Nexus scan. The majority of the other vulnerabilities will be addressed during the next Windows update. George has taken an administrative action on the IT security side, which prevents Central Square from entering the system without escort. Previously, during the implementation phase of this project, they were allowed access into our public safety data system network to work on items. This is an effort to limit their access and require that they go through any changes to the system with a system administrator present. And then also the last and my least favorite here is an item that I received today, and that is Jason Nyhart has submitted his resignation, and then a hiring plan is in process with the city of Coon Rapids. So not for poor purposes, my understanding is you have a better opportunity. So I'm not expecting that you talk about that, but we learned that today. So there is a process for replacement, even though I would say that Jason's hard to replace or difficult to replace.
Jason, this is the first I've heard of it. Thank you for your service. Where are you going?
Polaris, I'm gonna do logistics analyzation for that, so something with different.
Really? Good, well, good for you. Thank you again for your service.
So I will just, the CSCS is a great team. I think we do a lot of really good work, and it's, yeah, it's been a pleasure to be on the public safety side and learn everything and be a part of everything I've got to be a part of. So, thank you.
Okay, when is your last stage?
August 19th. So I've got a little bit of time to get some stuff together.
So get your projects in here.
Nobody buying anything from Polaris anymore. Yeah, supply chain. He'll come back.
Anyway, thank you again for your service. Certainly appreciate it. Speak on behalf of everybody. It's hard to see you go, but obviously if you got an opportunity to move your career in another direction, go ahead and take it. Thanks. Okay. And the next one, I think, is C, contracts. Go ahead, Chief.
Contract, so I'll just give a brief update on that. I've met with Anoka County officials and at the attorney's office in relation to coming up with some type of an agreement on access to the data systems between Anoka County and the PSPS system. What access is needed, kind of reducing that to paper as far as IT systems are concerned. Again, I had mentioned before that our network infrastructure and security is handled by LOGIS, but it does interact with some county systems as well. So they need to be part of, unlike our other cities who do not have access, because of CAD, there's some two-way communication that goes on. So we just need to make sure that we have a contract in place so everybody understands the roles and responsibilities. And we're working through that process.
Okay, hopefully by the October meeting, we'll have something to present.
Yeah, I think they started a while back, so it's a work in progress.
Okay.
And next was the Data Standards Committee, and that committee met on I think July 11th, and we didn't have a lot of items on the agenda, but one of the items was that I stepped down as chair of that committee so that I could chair the governance committee. And then Captain Andy Youngquist from Anoka gladly volunteered and stepped up to the plate for that, to chair that committee, the Data Standards Committee, and the group elected him to do so. So that is a recommendation to this group to appoint Andy as the chair. So if it's not allowable for that committee to just self-appoint.
And under our rules, I appointed the committee and the committee's elected chair, so you've been elected, so I appointed you last time, so. Or as they say, you've been voluntold.
Well, I put it as graciously stepped forward, but yeah.
Yeah, put the real spin on it, yeah.
And then just a few other items from the Data Standards Committee. That committee meets occasionally to go over issues that arise. One of them was, we added a few things onto their agenda. One was alerts for our law enforcement system, when we run into somebody who, another entity has flagged as deceased. So, if somebody's using somebody else's name, so we want to put that in our system as an alert that, at least one law enforcement agency in the county reported this person as deceased. So, it flagged something that might be going on. And then the other item was fire data, and then we talked about the RFP for the fire system as well. An update on that.
Thanks, Chief, and I encourage any chief here, if they want to join that committee, they would certainly be welcome to. Captain Youngquist, of course, is the chair of it, but I don't think there are any chiefs on it. If any chief does have an interest, they certainly are welcome to join it, just please let me know. Thank you, Chief Gators. Any questions about that? Standards, all right, let's move to Emergency Communications Committee. Chief Deputy, I don't think there's a report from the sheriff, is it?
No, and, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I forgot to mention, make sure, since his regrets, he had a conflict today, but, no report for that committee, but there is an upcoming meeting.
Okay, very good. Let's go to F then, for the Emergency Communications Department, Val Sprinton-Hennick, attachment E. Val, if you would, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, my update is attached, just a couple of changes. We currently have 6 openings for dispatchers. It closed last week, we had 70 applicants, but we're starting interviews on the 8th, so we're hoping to fill all of our spots in. And then we are going to be updating CAD. We're on an early adopter program to get the new version to 22.2, which we're hoping will solve some of our problems that we're having.
Okay.
Otherwise, my report is, yeah.
Thank you. Any questions for Val at this point by anyone? We did take an interesting tour last week. Mayor Marquez Similar and Chief Austin took a tour of the 911 Communications Center. I certainly would encourage anybody in this room to contact Val just to see it. It's unbelievable what goes on down there in terms of the technology. So I certainly would encourage, especially elected officials, if you do want an opportunity, and any chief, of course, or any city official, please. It's vital to our entire system. This is how it goes. Chief, I'm sure you haven't been there in 26 years, right?
Mr. Chair, that is correct. It has certainly changed with the exception of the siren system. I was waiting to see the vacuum tubes warm up on that, but outside of that, it is amazing the work that gets done. It is certainly a very special skill set, and hats off to you folks because it's. I still remember when I did my tour many moons ago, and it was an eye-opening experience to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. Mayor Marquez Simla, any other thoughts on your part? You were there too. Probably can't.
Can't hear you.
I think she's
Okay.
unmuting. Oh, not.
Nothing yet.
Oh. Was that me? Are you?
There we go.
Could you hear me?
Okay.
Mayor?
Yeah, I'm having just, I don't know, the worst connection here. Yes, the tour was fantastic. That's what we're still talking about, right? I didn't miss something.
That's correct, Mayor. Just looking for your thoughts as the elected official who toured it.
Yes, it was really fantastic. Valerie did such a great job, and when I told people about the tour, they said, "Oh, did you hear any really awful calls?" And I'm very glad that we didn't. I know that maybe that is a bit more, I guess the word exciting, but being a bystander to all of the trauma that people are going through when they make those calls. I'm very glad that while we were there, there was nothing very serious happening. So, but it was very, very well done. And then we also had a tour at the sheriff's department in the crime lab, and then what's the other chief?
The
We
crime
saw
scene
both
unit.
sides. There you go. We saw both sides, so it was really cool. Thank you.
Commissioner?
Oh, I'm sorry, I just had one question. Val, did you say there were 70 applicants for the
Yes,
10? Nice.
70.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you. All right, we can move on to, item 5G, Critical Infrastructure Protection Committee, Chief Austin.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Our subcommittee met back on June 24th, and just for everybody's recollection, we initially established this subcommittee to look at the possibility of using some of the JLEC reserves that we had in place to look at the possibility of purchasing some additional or some fencing for our needs in Anoka County. Since that time, some of the JLEC members have signed on to the Hennepin County Fencing Consortium, mainly out of just a short-term need. I don't know if it's necessarily a permanent fix, quite frankly, just because of the size of the consortium. But it allowed, some of us felt there was a need to move forward a little bit quicker than what we could. We also had, if you recall, Hennepin County did come in and talk a little bit about the fencing consortium, and the JLEC decided to not really weren't interested in jumping on board with the Hennepin County consortium. And I completely understand that. Like I said, I think there are some issues that I have with that consortium myself personally. But like I said, it's for short term, it's something that we can certainly utilize. As we continue to discuss these options, we learned real quick that when it comes to critical infrastructure protection, that it goes beyond a simple purchase of temporary fencing. It can also get into things such as training line staff on that type of preparedness, as well as city leadership, county leadership, to include elected officials, just to name a few. Like I said, when we talked about the fencing, one of the things we found out very quickly was, quite frankly, the cost to purchase this type of fencing is significantly higher when you compare it to the reserves that we have. And so if we were to, and after we discuss this further, we really wanted to have a conversation with JLEC to see if we want to continue to explore this, because if we were to move forward and continue to look at some of these options, bottom line is our operating budget will not, we just don't have the funding for it. It's expensive, and having said that, I do think it's worthwhile, and I think many of the chiefs in this room would think that looking at moving forward with this would also be worthwhile. But I just want to make sure that everybody does understand that there is a cost associated with this, and it's not a cheap cost. And so I just wanted to open it up for a discussion, and also to ask for some additional direction from the JLEC as far as how you would like the subcommittee to move forward. One thing I would ask, if we do continue to move forward with this, with the retirement of Chief Wise, I would ask that if we could get a representative from Anoka PD as well as the Sheriff's Office to be included in the subcommittee, specifically because of the proximity of the government center and the jail, because that is an area that I do think we have to also include in when we have this conversation, because the original conversation was just really talking about public safety centers, police stations, that type of thing. But I also think that we also have to include courtroom, the government center, and with that, I'd love to open it up for some discussion.
Thank you, Chief. I guess Chief Peterson and Chief Levy, Howard, since you were asked to go ahead and send whatever nominations you want to me, because I do the appointing for that. So if you would, and I think it is very important, as Chief Austin said, that representation right around the government center. Okay, let's open it up. If I can ask, can you tell me a show of hands, who's on the Hennepin County Consortium now? Was it? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Spindley Park, Lane, Columbia Heights, and Fridley, right? Okay. Anybody else?
And Mr. Chair, for what it's worth, I will tell you again, it was a situation where we felt that short-term meeting was necessary. But what I will tell you, what's made Anoka County unique over the years is the collaborative efforts with all of the governing bodies. We've been able to get some really good things done because of that. And you know, everyone I think pretty much knows Hennepin County and Ramsey County do not work that way. And I think because of the fact that we work so well together, I think that, you know, I think we can come up with some better ideas. You know, obviously with the number of cities that are involved in the Hennepin County Consortium, our cost for our operating budget isn't that, it actually isn't that much. And I understand if we were to do something here in Anoka County with just Anoka County, that cost would increase. But in my initial thought is it's worth it because again, you know, I think that it's gotten too big, quite frankly, with Hennepin County. I think they're up to 50 entities now that are signed on for this, and I think it just got too big, and that is my biggest concern. So,
Do you have other concerns like the priority, Chief?
that is another priority. Now, the chances of having 2 events at one time, you know, it's not out of the realm of possibility. You know, I don't anticipate something like that happening, but at the same time, you know, I didn't think that when Coon Rapids had their double homicide, that was going to a rumor mill was going to start where it was starting to turn into the rumor of an officer, that it was an officer-involved shooting as well. And fortunately, Chief Wise was able to knock that rumor down fairly quickly. But I can tell you that again, that is one of those new threats that we have to deal with, where time is, we just simply, it's timing and the time to respond to things like that. Honestly, we just don't have the time like we used to. Once upon a time, we had days. Unfortunately, in some of these situations, hours or less.
Just for the benefit of some of the elected officials in here, can you kind of give us, or maybe Chief, give us kind of a summary of what the Hennepin County program is and why you guys joined it, if you can?
Well, I think, Mr. Chair, I think when Mark read the Public Works from Crystal, he addressed this group, you know, quite a long time ago, I think. And even since then, I think a lot of things have changed. And I don't know all the things that have changed. It's been a lot. I don't know every little thing that's changed. But when he worked with us, I mean, I think the JPA that we have seems pretty solid. And I think as the chiefs, we talked at our chiefs meeting about getting something very short term, especially those of us that are close to Minneapolis, because they're experiencing the most issues with protesters and Brooklyn Center. And so we wanted to do something short term, hoping the committee would maybe think of a long term solution for all of the Anoka County agencies. We also are talking with, as chiefs are talking about training our officers to be mobile field force to do that very, very short term window, like Lenny talked about with Coon Rapids, until the dispensing can get out and do it. So right now, I'm looking at the list, the email that he just gave us. He said there was 14 agencies, 4 of them from Anoka County, and many other ones going in front of the councils in August. So I don't know how many we'll ultimately have, but I know there were some concerns that people brought up, priorities and that type of thing. But when you talk to Mark Gray, it really seemed like a good fit for us. And there's a lot of things that being law enforcement has to adapt to. We can't predict everything that we'll probably use this fencing for something we don't even think of right now. And so I guess, you know, for us, it was such a small investment, it was worrying for us, but I can't answer every detailed question you share about, you know, the details of the GAA.
Any others?
Go for it.
No, I was just, kind of echo what I think I think we all think it's a good, certainly good short-term investment, but we don't want to give up on this group either, because we all have the concern as well that if there are multiple, incidents, or multiple areas that have the need for that fencing, the concern continues to be, is there enough and who's going to get that first? And you have so many member agencies that are part of it. So I certainly want to continue to explore it here, but it is a concern, and it's going to be a race. I mean, for those that are, maybe the elected officials that are not aware of what Chief Austin spoke of in Coon Rapids, that was a matter of, it wasn't even hours when those allegations were being made, when Chief Weiss was quickly able to kind of quell those rumors that it was an officer-involved shooting, but the efforts were being made right away. And I think that's what we're up against. And so those municipalities that have bought into this already, we certainly see the need for it. We think it's a good investment right now, but we don't want to give up long-term on working something out here, and eventually maybe remove ourselves from that. So,
Okay. Other comments?
Here.
Yes.
Lenny, those of us that have been working on the subcommittee and talked about this and also business that cost everything. Part of the things that we consider is the extension of the special levy that we have to basically position ourselves to be able to deal with the extra costs that this is going to take. Nobody here is in favor of extra levies, but we have that in place right now. It's an easier lift, frankly, to keep a levy than it is to ask for a new one down the road. And frankly, we can use those funds for this purpose, but we can also use them for other things that jail will be doing down the road. So if we're going to continue down this path in Anoka County, which I think is a good thing for us to look at, because we have to ultimately be responsible for protecting our own infrastructure here. Infrastructure isn't cheap. We should look at extending that levy for this purpose, but also because there are other unknowns that we have coming down the pipe. Let's put that out there too.
Other comments? Chief, what about next steps? You got any thoughts on next steps? What do you want to do? You want to start having a chief's meeting to flesh out a plan? How do you
So,
want to-
Mr. Chair, I think what I'm hearing is we'll continue to move forward, and I think with the assistance of Anoka PD and the Sheriff's Office, I think we can start taking some next steps, and some of those next steps, hopefully, we can get an idea on some different options as far as just some initial, some preliminary looks at some costs, as far as what we're looking at. And so hopefully by the next one, October?
October, that's correct.
So we should, and hopefully we'll have something for you by then, and just we can have a larger discussion on as far as where this is going from a financial standpoint.
And what I'd like to just also, Chief, not only just the fencing portion, but actually have a total response plan in a sense of, just like the chief did. Because you gotta have your communications coordinator, you gotta get that on social media right away. I mean, who's gonna be calling out, public works and stuff out? So I think it's more than just paying for the cost of it. You were talking about a total response plan, which should be in place so that you can move really within an hour to get all this done. And the communications, I agree, is huge. So I'm assuming each one of our police departments does have some sort of communications person. And that, I really agree, that should be part of the plan. That's part of it. So it isn't just the fencing, let's put it together as a total plan that we can all work off of. So we don't have to, obviously create the wheel every time we have a situation. Just a suggestion.
Thank you. We'll put together some of those preliminary numbers, and get those ready to go for October.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
with regard to a PD, you can appoint me to be on.
Okay, I will. Commander Heath. Okay, thank you. All right, any other questions or discussions? Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Well, generally, we don't, you can be a member of the public, but go ahead, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you. No, I appreciate it. I just wanted to make sure I understood what you guys were saying. And by the way, thank you. I'm not part of this committee, obviously. I'm just coming So the fencing, though, you want to get out of Hennepin, those who are in it, if this group decides to do it on their own. That's what you're exploring.
Commissioner, that is correct. Right now, Hennepin County, I think it's a short-term solution.
Okay.
But I go back to, because of the fact that it, God forbid, if there's an event where we have to deploy, those things, having that Anoka County connection with everyone, it's going to go a lot smoother. And I think it will get done faster, and that's probably the biggest advantage.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Commissioner Myers, the other thing is, too, I think we wanted to be very clear that even though we're in this Hennepin County short-term solution, that doesn't mean we don't want to be part of the long-term solution, what Chief Danny talked about. So that was just something, because we're so close to Minneapolis, we felt important to do that, but we do want to be part of the long-term solution for sure. So we just want to be very transparent with that, with everyone.
Thank you.
Appreciate all the comments, thank you. All right, we move on then to, item number 6, Fire Protection Council. Chief.
Mr. Chair, just a quick report, we haven't had our meeting yet, so tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. to be Friendly in the Chief Theater, to discuss the approval of the RFP, which we'll be talking about and hopefully approving. Also, the vendor selection process for the RMS. Sounds like they want to open it up August 1st and debate it on October 1st. Other than committee reports and court services, that's pretty much all from you, Jim.
Okay.
I don't know if that's any questions.
I'm assuming, Chief, that, does the Fire Protection Council adopt their budget in January?
Mr. Chair, we used to, and then we revisited that. So we adopted our budget last April.
Okay,
So the budget for next year will be adopted.
okay, thank you. You obviously have the benefit of knowing what ours is.
Correct. That's why we wanted to parallel.
All right, thanks, Chief. Any questions, Chief Thompson? Anybody? All right, thanks, Chief. Let's move on to item number 7, User Groups Chief Law Enforcement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As most know, we're on our summer hiatus right now, so we reconvene in September. Just a couple of things. We do have a new member, Chief John Stankey from Coon Rapids, a longtime member of Coon Rapids Police Department, so probably a familiar name for many. The only other thing that I'm going to maybe make the group aware of is that we are closely watching. I think law enforcement across the state, but specifically the chiefs, are watching. The post has convened a rules committee, has made a lot of recommendations, and we've all been providing input on that through the post board, and be closely watched, because there are some things that could be very impactful and some things that are fairly controversial as well, depending on who we ask. So that is all we have. We reconvene in summers over here. So
Just procedurally, I understand, Chief, that the legislature couldn't get it out of, couldn't pass a bill this year, so Post went on their own and produced these rules.
yeah, the rules, pretty much. They made recommendations, and it's going to be, well, there's a process for it, similar to any rules committee, and whether the Post actually adopts those recommendations is to be determined, depending on what the administrative law judge, I think it goes to first, but then makes the recommendations to the board, and then it's up to the Post board to then adopt them or not. But there are even law enforcement groups that agree and don't agree on certain provisions of those rules as well. So even we're not in the news in some of those things. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but it will likely be impactful. Some of the things are very good changes, I think. Some of them are, there's no clear direction on what they even mean, and that's part of the problem.
The director, the executive director of County Attorney Association did send a letter pointing out some concerns, probably, same with other law enforcement.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, too,
Yeah.
the feedback a little bit on Chief Danny. The other thing that we're having difficulty in law enforcement dealing with is the new law with the edibles and the THC levels. And for the elected officials, that is something that we are constantly working with the League of Minnesota Cities and trying to help with our community and our staffing and everything. So it's been very difficult. We probably sit here talking about it the rest of the day, but it got in on the last day on the 400-page bill.
And Chief, I expect something will be coming out of my office in terms of, some guidance
We appreciate that.
on that. For the record, there are no gummies in the county attorney's office. I just.
There are none. But
Yeah. Anyway, all right, thank you, Chief. Anything else? Okay. Criminal investigations. Chief Elwood.
Mr. Chair, BCA rolled out the Track It program a couple of weeks ago in our region. This is a program that was a result of the legislative mandate that allows sexual assault victims to track their case status, the status of their kids as it goes through the system. CID gets notified by email anytime kids ready to be picked up at the hospital, and we've been several the first 2 weeks of the program. Seems to be working well so far. CID is also working with Justice Services on some transcription software. It's going to allow the detectives to take statements and for the entire statement to be automatically transcribed within a matter of seconds or minutes, depending on how long. We're in the testing phase on this, but it was going to allow expedition of those cases. And finally, our support staff member in the drug task force, resigned on short notice last week. We're working through a recreated and adjusted duties and assignments that we hope to get approved hopefully in mid-August. They made some temporary changes to make sure that the case flow is not interrupted. That's no issue yet. Much of it.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I just want to shout out to CID as well, Kevin, for the manslaughter case that they worked back in March. That just, I believe there's a fee agreement that was made finished up last month. And I just have to say, this is more for the elected leadership here. When we have a major event like that, regardless of the city, it is really impressive to see the all hands on deck response by CID, crime lab, crime scene unit, and the crime lab. It's really impressive to see that, and I can guarantee you that there is no other county in the state of Minnesota that responds on something like that. It's really fascinating to watch. So appreciate the work on that.
Pass along the words to the troops.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay, thanks. Onward. Education, training, and firearms, I guess you're next too.
Continuing on, got some training courses coming up here until primarily August, September here, exploring the sexual offender and violent offender. The 2-day course here, August 8th and 9th. We have a active shooter instructor course here the 3rd week of August, 22nd to the 25th. That's put on by the NCOA, National Tactical Officers Association. We've got implicit bias, conflict management, autism, CIT training, August 1st. September 1st, I got it again in October and again in November. Multiple dates on that if you need to get people through it. First aid essentials on September 20th, and EMR refresher coming September 21st and 22nd. Any information dates on that, get hold of me or Kelly Wellman or Lieutenant Jacobson, get you dates, costs, and all that. That is my report.
All right, thanks, Chief. Any questions of the chief, comments? All right, thank you. Let's move on to emergency management. Terry Stoltzman, are you still on?
I am. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Terry Stoltzman, Emergency Management Director for Anoka County. Our department continues to support many civic events throughout the summer and into the fall. Many of the chiefs in the room have borrowed equipment and or used some of our staff for events. Kudos to Blaine on another successful 3M Open. Well done, as usual. They also had the soccer tournament the week before. As we move into the fall, September is National Preparedness Month for all the members in the room, for your constituents and the people that live in your communities. Ready.gov is the place to go for a lot of information to spread the good word about preparedness and what happens when the bad stuff happens. That's all my report, Mr. Chair.
All right, thanks, Terry. Let's move on then. Auto theft task force.
Mr. Chair, the county auto theft task force grant money, most of it was used up last year. Our fiscal year ended the end of June. Any funds that were not used are all automatically shifted to the next year. We did receive 4 license plate readers, and we've been been shipping out to the agencies, that need them. We remember we need to have a policy in place before we can use them as part of the grant, that we have to use them. So they've been very successful. We've been knocking out stolen vehicles, a few a week, coming up. So if you're driving a stolen vehicle through quickly, we're gonna catch you. So let the bad guys know. But, so far so good. And that's really, starting to make a dent, I think, in auto theft. So, that's my report.
Chief, there's ever a myth about Kias and Hyundais being the most stolen.
That's true. That's true.
Talk a little bit about that. There was something on TikTok about how to unlock them.
Well,
Any doing?
Mr. Chair, I'm not on TikTok. So I'd like to put on that. I feel like somebody has more information than that on Kia. No, they're the most, they're stolen. Kia and Hyundai are not taking responsibility for this to help us out. And, I don't know the exact, from what I understand, it's easy to break in within minutes. They can break the window, maybe a little more. They can break the steering column, and there's an easy wire or something they can hit and go.
It's as close to an old-fashioned hot wiring as there is.
Really?
But it's pretty straightforward. Most vehicles, it's virtually impossible to do that these days.
Almost like on the old GMs.
Yeah, well, it's easier than that. It's much easier than that on these, because the steering columns are made out of softened peanut butter.
Yeah.
It's really easy to get through.
Yeah, they have Kia plugs where they go through, they smash the window, get in the car and start it within minutes and go. So that's true. The other thing I thought was fascinating is that if you, you pull up to your driveway or the store and you leave your car running because you're gonna keep your key fob with you, and we had talked about this at the last meeting, you go inside the store or your house and leave your car running, somebody can get in your car and go. And just because you have the fob doesn't mean your car's gonna shut off when they get in there. It'll go until they shut it off, and then it won't go anymore. So they can't steal it. So I think people think that, oh, if I got my fob, I'm okay. No, you should still shut it off and keep the fob with you. So I felt that was pretty interesting on the auto theft task force.
Chief, part of the grant, any public education portion of this?
Yeah, there is, and I'm not sure of the details of that. And I will say, I only speaking for Chrissy, I feel like our converter deaths are decreasing a little bit. And I don't know why, but they are decreasing a little bit. So I don't know if other chiefs are seeing that in their communities, so.
And we're Prius is the top target for those?
Yep, they got better materials inside.
Mr. Chair, Mitsubishi is the #1 jack converter right now, and they're impossible to get. The wait time now is over 3 months to get a new Mitsubishi converter. So if yours is stolen, your insurance company's on the hook for quite a bit of money for rental cars, provided good insurance. But I have also seen a significant decline in my shop in converter replacements. The assumption is there's less being taken. I think a lot of it's to do with the advertising of marketing events, the advertising that we're gonna crack down on the buyers. Just that message alone tells people they don't wanna get caught with 5 converters in their car. So I think that messaging has gone a long ways to one of the few places I think we can scare criminals.
And we do have in all of our chiefs have this information. There is the catalytic converter ordinance for our individual cities. We held off on it, we talked about it, because we thought the state was gonna do more, and so we were kind of waiting on that. We're still waiting to come back in a special session, but, we're not holding our breath. But, we were hoping they'd come back and do something. If they don't, then we may have to, if people are seeing an increase, get back into that ordinance. If they possess a catalytic converter, they can be charged with misdemeanor without the proper paperwork.
Thank you, Chief. And just a reminder, insurance rates, when you think, well, it's just that person got their car stolen. No, insurance rates, insurance companies, of course, determine their rate based on the amount of auto theft in your city. So even though your car isn't stolen, you could be paying higher insurance rates as a result of that. So this is a crime that certainly affects all of us. You pay car insurance. So just a reminder about that. There are significant differences from cities to cities. St. Paul and Minneapolis, you're probably paying some of the highest insurance rate because of their rate of auto theft down there. Anyway, thank you, Chief. Any questions of Chief looking on that? Okay, thank you. Let's move on. Let's go to the elected officials' input, and I'll go right down the roster here. Pat Antonin.
I got nothing.
Okay, Commissioner Bradstead, Julie.
I have nothing to say.
Okay, Jim Dickinson, you want to speak on behalf you have over? Hand over?
No, we'll be.
All right. Tony, Bing?
No, thank you.
We're going quick here. Dan Deno?
I guess I would mention, since they brought up the gummies, we actually talked about that at our last council meeting. We were planning on doing a moratorium to determine what gets determined. Maybe Mr. Palumbo will send us some information. So, otherwise, nothing else.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Steve Feldman?
Nothing at this time, Mr. Chair.
Chelsea Hall?
I have nothing to report at this time, Mr. Chair.
Brad Johnson? Amanda Marquez Simula?
Yes, I have some fun, good news for Columbia Heights. The Minnesota Association of Government Communicators Annual Northern Lights Award was held recently, and Columbia Heights received, I believe, top prize, I know, for the podcast that the police are doing. It's called Roll Call. You can find it on Spotify or anywhere you find your podcast. So that's between the police and staff. And they won that in the Northern Lights Award category of community engagement. So way to go, chief and staff. And then also we have bringing on our second embedded social worker to our force starting, I believe, next week, or no, August 8th, I think, after August 8th. So kudos to the chief and those working in Columbia Heights. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Dave Oswald?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one thing is that we're looking forward to the night next week. We've got a very large first responder presence planned with all of our units to get out and get in the community.
All right, thank you. Kim Sanders?
Nothing for the good of the order, Mr. Chair.
Okay. See, Brian West?
Mr. Chair, can you hear me?
Yes.
Very good. City of Anoka continues to look forward to the end of 2023 when Highway 10 construction will be finished. And we are diligently continuing our negotiations with the county board on a new jail proposal, which I think is going quite well. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Move on to item number 9. Anybody got any old business they want to?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Ken Munling, City of Spring Lake Park, we're having a workshop next week on the gummies. On social media today, they reported that Minnesota had its first gummy death, of driving. Can't remember which city, I think it was in the western suburbs. So it's going to be a problem that's going to have to be negotiated between city council to figure out how to handle it. It's a legal product, so good luck to all.
There'll be a myriad of issues, I think, related to that. Good, thank you. I didn't skip anybody, did I? I want to make a roll call for elected officials. We're good. All right, thank you. No old business, we'll go to new business. Item number 10, a board composition. Attachment F is here, and Commissioner Schulte, I know you had some thoughts of the governance committee, and I thought you might want to share them here if you could.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, we are a model organization for every other county, every other state. They all look at us because we've done it right for so long. And I believe in that, and I stand by it. However, the idea of extending the public safety levy has been brought up. This board voted on it, on an almost unanimous vote, a year and a half ago in this room, maybe even 2 years ago now. But that's a big list that we have to do pretty soon. The issue with that has come up at our county board is that the county board has to levy, even though if this city and for these cities and entities are all for it and want it, it goes against the county's certified levy. So it raises our certified levy number, and it makes it, we're levying for those dollars. The county board has to vote to do it. We levy for the dollars, but the legislation, the statute says you control. When we raise that money, you vote how it gets spent. That doesn't sit well with every county board member. And they're saying, well, if that's the case, if joint law is going to spend this money, and the county's already a 66% funder of everything that joint law does, we should have more seats at the table. we should have a stronger vote, a bigger voice, more or less. Whoever doing the taxing should be making the decisions. And there's an argument to be made that the county board has not disagreed with what joint law has done to this point. They always have agreed, both I and Commissioner Rest had worked hard last time to make sure that the county board would be willing to do that original public safety levy extension when we did it last time. I think we can do it this time, it's just not proving to be as easy. And I'm wondering if it's not time to consider if this board could have more county representation, because we bring most of the money to the table. When I say most, percentage-wise, we're at 66, and we have 2 voting members. Wondering if that's something we should consider. This all happened in Lionel Lake, it's not a lot of them. They had kind of the same issue where they were on a board where they put in most of the money and just didn't get all the votes necessary to get done everything they wanted. I'm raising this as an issue to be thought about and talked about. I'm not saying Anoka County's gonna walk away from jail. I'm not saying we have a problem with any current plans, because we don't know of any current plans. I'll just bring up one issue that was bounced around last year, and that's when talking about a public safety campus. And JLEC was kind of working with Fire Protection Council and others, thinking, okay, where can we do this? The North Metro Training Center. And the county board wasn't necessarily on board with that. We don't have a need for that. And if we're going to levy the tax dollars, we want to spend on stuff that we spend our money on. Radio towers, radios for the squad cars. Of course, your constituents are our constituents. We recognize that and want to work with you in this process to come up with a better plan. Or a good plan, I won't say a better plan, because right now, JLEC has proven to be very successful. And the last thing we want to do is change that success. But this is something that I think we need to talk about. It's been the elephant in the room for a couple of years, and I've been dancing around it, trying to figure out how not to do this. But I think we have to have a conversation. This is under new business. Certainly, if you want to talk about it now, we can talk more. If you want to ruminate over it for the next couple of quarters or a year or whatever. The only reason it's here now is I know how long it's going to take a lot of your city councils to get the energy together to go down to the legislature and extend this levy. Because there's 2 things that have to happen to extend it. The legislature has to pass a law saying they're going to extend it. And then the county board has to vote, not unanimously, but a majority of the county board to actually levy the dollars. Those 2 things both have to happen if we want that thing to continue. That doesn't affect this group, though. I mean, if we don't extend the public safety levy, that doesn't mean this group doesn't have power and work to do. Because we've always been in existence before the public safety data levy or public safety levy was ever. I hope I'm not talking too fast, and I hope it makes some kind of sense to everybody. Again, I'm not taking the air out of the room, because I think this is a functional group that will be running for a very long time. The question is, in what capacity and who's on. Thank you.
Keith Austin. Mr. Chair, Commissioner Schulte, some of us were not in these positions when this went through the last time. Can you walk us through a little bit as far as what we're talking about as far as timeline? I mean, when is the go, no go date to get to the legislature and get this moving forward?
Sure. Well, I'll be honest, this originally was put in place before my time. But the second renewal of the public safety levy, first it was done, I believe, for megahertz radios, is when it was first done. And then it was renewed in 2013, I believe, or 2014, when we went for the public safety data system. And that's when we got the levy extended. And it took us over a year and a half. Tony led the charge, going to every city council, convincing the cities it was the right thing to do, and then convincing the county board it was the right thing to do, and then again, getting the legislature to get them to change statute. And that was what we got in the first session we went down there. It took a lot of work and a lot of phone calls, but we got it done in one session. And in this particular case, it's exactly what would have to happen, because the next session starts in 2023. And we need this done before the fall of 2023, when this law sunsets. So it'll be challenging. The one advantage I think we have is We've already gone through all the city councils with this. Of course, there's a lot of new city council members. So it may have to be done again, which was a heavy lift for the county attorney, and we'd have to make sure that the new county attorney is willing to do the same thing. Or maybe I should rephrase that, the new chair of joint law, if that's the county attorney, or maybe we pick a police chief, a rotating former police chief. For the chair. I mean, that's another thing this board gets to decide, is who's the next chair. Unless Tony's gonna stay on as chair, but he's not. Thank you.
And one of the reasons we go to all the city councils is because it will be a tax. And, it's a tax on all citizens, regardless of you're a county citizen or a city citizen, it will be a tax. And we felt it was much better to include the decision. And that's why we were to city council. And it was pretty yes.
And just a quick follow-up, if anybody knows me, I am a huge public safety advocate. I believe in police and sheriff and everything we do, including fire protection, all of it. And I will continue to fight for that tooth and nail. And the majority of my board feels the same, if not all of it. I don't pull them regularly on this, but I can tell you, most of us want the bad guys in jail. Sooner rather than later, we want them kept there. And we know that takes resources and energy and lots of meetings like this. Frank, been at a meeting, guys. A little challenging. I apologize, rambling.
The statute, by the way, is found in 383E, which is the special Anoka County statute. We have our own statute. Other questions? Well, Commissioner, your member of the public, go ahead.
I'm sorry, but, if I may be allowed to speak. So I mean, I'm just speaking for myself. I barely know what JLEC is about, and I'm a pretty curious commissioner. So I would just encourage Mr. Chair that the 7 months have a work session about this.
This Mr. Chair or that Mr. Chair?
You, Mr. Chair of the board. Because this, what you just proposed, I think really is worthy of a full discussion with the board. So that would be my only comment at this time, because like I said, I barely know what JLEC is really about, but it sounds really important, and I want to make sure I'm informed, and I would assume all of us would like that opportunity to. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Commissioner Meister, it's already on your calendar.
Oh, perfect.
Budget discussions, workshop.
Thank you.
This is all part of, we set budgets, we gotta know what our levy is. This will be.
Okay, and this will be specifically then part of the, anything like a budget? Okay.
We can take this on. We'll talk about it for the 2023 budget, because we'll have to decide if we're gonna levy for this.
Okay. Any other comments? Anyone? Yes. Chief Danny?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Schulte. So, as the Cleos, we've had a lot of discussions in the past year about this because we certainly see the value in the public safety levy. We look at, even though we don't have anything formal right now, we had discussion today, even, Councilmember Johnson brought up, fencing and infrastructure protection. We've had discussion about, updating our severe weather siren technology. We've had discussions about countywide mental health, mobile field force. We've had a lot of different discussions. So I think I can speak on behalf of the chief law enforcement officers that we are all certainly see the value of the levy, and we all know there's strength in numbers too. Okay, but so we don't want to lose that, and whatever that takes to have those discussions. We're prepared to make a motion to at least have governance look at that structure. But I don't know if we're putting the cart before the horse and letting the county board do that, have those meetings first and have those discussions. If we're going to look at the structure of the council, and I think that's a pretty big discussion to have. And I don't think anybody wants that public safety levy to sunset. We also want everybody to be good with it too. So that's my 2 cents for now, I guess. Further discussion before we're going.
Are you suggesting an action item?
So it could be, I don't know if there's further discussion to be had first.
We'll have that discussion, or if you want to. Any other thoughts? Anyone else? Yes.
Chief Danny, I agree with you. It should be something, an action item that can come out of here. But I don't think the county should talk about it first. I really think this should be an action item for the governance committee to be brought back to this group. The county shouldn't decide how this group is formed. This is formed of multiple municipalities, a fire department, we're at, you know, emergency communications. There's other people in this room that should decide how this is developed. And I don't want, I mean, the county is bringing it up. Actually, the county board is bringing it up, not county staff. And I don't want county board to have deep fingers in this deciding how it's going to work. I do want this group to figure that out, and the county board will figure out a way to work with you to help form that, or to be a part of that discussion. But we don't want to leave it. And I think governance is probably a good place for this to land, and let them wrestle with it for a while, and then get feedback, bring it back here, and have a discussion here again. Just my suggestion from the county.
I don't know what he said, yes, go ahead, Mayor Sanders.
Mr. Chair, is this something that we would probably have to vote on if we were looking at a change in the JLAC as far as
Representation, Chief?
would that probably have to take place? I'm just thinking of the timeline that's laid out. Would that probably have to take place as a vote for the next meeting in order to
You could change the joint powers agreement, yes, that would require on the cities too. Not just people here, but city councils, because we're all members of the joint powers agreement. Yes.
Mr. Chair, Chief Austin, if I could just reply, what I'm suggesting is not a quid pro quo. We're not going to do the levy unless you change it. It's a suggestion that we're probably going to do the public safety levy. I can probably convince my colleagues. Of course, I can't swear to that. They all have different minds, and I need to give them good compelling evidence why it's a good idea. All of them believe in public safety, so I think I can do that. It's just the idea that for fair representation, for overall, in the long run, I think we need to look at this, because we won't always have a county board that's public safety oriented. I've seen it happen in big cities and towns all across the country. You all have read about it, you've all heard about it, and I want to protect this group and isolate them from something like that. I think this is the only way to do it.
And Chief, I can add on a little bit, since I was down there testifying when this bill was passed. Essentially, the legislature looked at it, do you have a project? Not just a levy for public safety, because their response is, well, you know, that's part of your regular levy anyway. Do you have a special project? Then we will look at it and give you authority. Because it says on a project approved by the Joint Law Enforcement Council. So between now and then, we should come up with a project that will make it an easier sell down to the legislature, that we're asking for money, you know, earmarked for something. Fund a need type of thing.
That's exactly why I wanted to try and do a specific critical infrastructure project.
Right.
That we would come up with.
Sure. Mayor, you have?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just, Commissioner Schultz, he's just asking, is there a specific ask from the county board, or just that we have the discussion? We don't want to make sure that when the governance board comes back, that we're having the appropriate discussion. So are you asking for 66% of the votes at the table? Is there a different ask? Is it just that we have the conversation? Just want to make sure that the governance board has a very clear expectation of what that conversation should entail.
Mr. Chair, Mayor Sanders, no, it's a specific ask to consider modifying the membership to give Anoka County more votes. More votes, I won't say votes, more votes. It just, and it doesn't have to be commensurate, it doesn't have to be 66% of the vote. It just has to recognize that Anoka County has a lot of stake in what goes on. And that, and you understand as a mayor, we levy those dollars. It counts against our certified levy. Nobody else cares. They're still going to compare us to every other county. And they're not going to see that ours includes parks. Hennepin County doesn't even include parks. Ours includes a public safety levy. Theirs doesn't include that. And yet we're compared to all of them. So on a media perspective, on a perception perspective, we're taxing higher than anybody else for good reasons, but nobody else knows that. So they're cognizant of that. They're concerned about it. And like I said earlier, I think I'm going to be able to solve it anyway. I think we're going to do it. It's just a matter of knowing that when we're paying money here, it's going for what we believe in, because we're the ones reputationally taking the hit for the tax.
Okay. Keep swimming.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make one point to the group as a whole. This is, I think we're talking about having a discussion at governance there, and then exploring that and bringing back a recommendation. Nothing can move forward without it coming back here for ratification. I would also note that I think all of our member cities in this group are also member cities of the Anoka County Fire Protection Council. And that is exactly the cost sharing formula that group has. It's a weighted, the cost sharing and the voting authority are linked. And I'm not assuming that's what governments would come up with, but that type of a model is already something that I suspect all of our communities have already agreed to on the fire side.
Mr. Chair, to add to that, too, the one uniqueness of fire, I can be corrected if I'm wrong, is they use property values, which we don't think would work from a law enforcement perspective, obviously. So, it may not be the right answer for us, but it may be something to consider for governments, that there are potential other models that would be more equitable and also provide fair representation as well.
Mr. Chair, and allude to what Chair Schulte was talking about with Lino Lakes and Centennial Fire District, which Circle Pines and Centerville are part of, that was a bad breakup, and it cost us a lot more money, and I know you guys are paying a lot more money, and it was, I think we all, if we had hindsight, would go back and probably not do that, because our fire department budget tripled, and that's all because of how the voting and all that split up. So I just caution, it's not worked out great for us. It's cost us all a lot more money, and council member, I know that it's cost you guys a lot more money too, and it's so I just caution that if we've got a good thing going, try to keep it going and not cost us a lot more money, because it's been painful.
Mr. Chair, can I speak against myself for a moment? I want us to have this conversation for a lot of reasons. One is, I can tell you this county board has no interest in having more power on this board. It's not our concern. I don't think you've seen the county dissent to a single vote of jail that I recall. So that's not the point. But then as I think through my head, we can be a whole different county board 5 years from now. And now you have more votes here that might work against law. Totally aware of that. That's why I want to have these conversations, so we can flesh out some of this, make sure that if we do shift voting power on the board, that it doesn't go too far, that it's still cities overall that still have control of their own destinies, and yet everybody here in the room is right. We're much more powerful as a group. Our money goes a lot further as a group. So, again, kind of speaking against myself a little bit there, fully understand that, but that's where good thinking works. It drives you into places you don't know how to get.
One quick comment. Sure. To play the Pollyanna side here, let's not lose sight of doing good projects that are worthy projects, critical infrastructure, or whatever it may be, and not be naive in our stature. For instance, that being territorial and thinking that if something bad happens in Columbia Heights or Fridley, that it does not impact us. Let's think about it. The levy, if the county's valuation and everything else is impacted, it does impact those that are a distance away. So from that perspective, and I hate to tell some thought of Met Council regionalism, but this is an opportunity where within Anoka County, it makes sense. It makes sense to stand up and work with your neighbors, because if the county is impacted or a city in the county is impacted, it impacts us as well in other locations. Maybe a little bit less, but it still does. So we all have a vested interest in it. So let's just not lose sight of good, worthy projects and get caught up in rancor of where it's at. Ultimately, I do believe this board is, you probably won't see me again, so that's probably good for a while. But I just kind of impressed upon you, we still got to do what's right. And do what's right for the county as a whole. That's what this group's all about.
Mr. Chair, last word for me, this is just, you're right, project specific. Ours, in my mind, it needs to be projects. I don't think it can be one, because it's too big of a lift for one project. But that's what needs to be developed sooner rather than later to make sure everybody's on board. Because again, if you tell me you're going to build a public safety training center and it's on the far east edge of the county, and it's for fire departments and police departments to train. Anoka County really doesn't have an overall force in that race. We have a lot of, I mean, public safety is a big deal, but we have so many other expenses coming up between sirens, radios. I mean, there's just so much coming up where the county wants to invest our dollars that I think we need to make that list, and we all need to agree with it before we go to the legislature.
I think in lieu of a formal motion, Chief, I think what I'll do is Chair's prerogative. I will request the Chair of the Governance Committee on the next agenda, and that meeting will be October 12th, 2022 at 2 p.m., and that is at room 710 of the Government Center. Any person sitting in this room that wants to attend and would like to participate in that discussion, I am certainly, by leave of the Chair of that committee, am inviting anybody that wants to attend to voice their thoughts. Okay? Chief Kitters, I'm assuming that's okay with you? Absolutely. All right, very good. Thank you, Commissioner. Obviously, beginning of many discussions later on. All right, let's go and move on to item number 11B, which is appointment of the JLEC member to the Logis board. That was Chief Wise, who's retired, and it would be my appointment of Chief Jeff Caters to the Logis board. And at this point, I need ratification from this board for my appointment. I would entertain a motion to approve Chief Caters to the Logis board on our behalf.
I'll move.
All right.
Sorry, Chief.
Yeah. I have a motion and a second by Chief.
Chair Phil makes a second.
All right, thank you. Any discussion? All right. Hearing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations, Chief, you got another hat to wear. All right, let's move on to item number 10C here, and I put this on the agenda because I've asked Captain Youngquist, who's been a part of that program, the lethality assessment program. It's been around for about 12 years or so, but it has grown to be such a model, not only for Anoka County, but certainly throughout the state and the nation, that I think Captain Youngquist, I would like to at least speak to this topic so that some of our elected officials can understand exactly what we are doing here in Anoka County to prevent domestic violence and specifically homicide as a result of it. Captain Youngquist, if you would, please.
Mr. Chair, members of JLEC, thank you for having me, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to brag about Anoka County law enforcement and a program that we've been participating in for the past 12 years. Just to give some of the elected officials and non-law enforcement parties present an idea, the lethality assessment program, called the LAP program, was started in 2010 in response to a concerning number of domestic-related assaults and homicides occurring in Anoka County. Anoka County Sheriff's Office and Columbia Heights PD were the first agencies to adopt this program, which is a proactive, victim-focused and approach to curb domestic violence. The LAP program utilizes a multidisciplinary approach that offers the best response and resources for victims of domestic violence, particularly trying to identify and assist those that are at greatest risk for homicide or serious injury. Multidiscipline means from dispatchers at 911 to law enforcement to Alexandria House advocates, criminal prosecution authorities, correctional personnel and programs, straight through the criminal justice system where judicial influence and direction can reduce recidivism and re-victimization of domestic violence. Anoka County Corrections is the only agency to have an IDAP program, and IDAP is through probation, intensive domestic abuse pretrial program supervision. So before they're even appearing in court, there is Anoka County taking an approach to trying to monitor offenders. In the first 5 years of the program, Anoka County experienced less than half of the domestic-related homicides than it did in the preceding 5 years. So it's a very victim-oriented and proactive approach to curb domestic violence. Many of you know and remember Lonnie Payne from the Sheriff's Office, who spearheaded the program. In her work as grant manager The DOJ has taken an interest in the lab program and are using the Anoka County model for other counties throughout the country. Members of the current lab program agreed to be a part of a peer mentoring type group to explain how the program works for us locally. Currently, the DOJ is organizing a virtual visit, a virtual meeting with representatives from Honolulu, Hawaii, and currently arguing for an in-person meeting at their location. But I'm happy to answer any questions about the lab program that anybody might have.
Can you give just a brief oversight, Captain, a little bit of what happens? How does it, the call goes out to 911, what happens?
From this committee, it's kind of a group, think tank of other best serve victims. And dispatch has gotten involved in all these different disciplines, and there's actually a county website that you can visit, and it will walk the victim right through what's going to happen. So officers respond to calls, and they actually give victims of domestic violence a victim's rights card, and on that card, you have this website for victims to see prior, okay, this is what's happening. My spouse is arrested, and it kind of walks them through the program and from arrest to conviction and post-conviction. There's also initiatives in this program where officers read a screening tool to the victims on scene. And it's a screening tool involving maybe 12 questions that a victim answers. And based on their responses to those questions, it will flag that person for a high risk of being a victim of serious domestic violence. And if it does trigger that, law enforcement gets in touch with Alexander House on scene and takes their phone, puts it in the victim's hand, and says, talk to an advocate right now. So it really, it aggressively gets resources to victims of domestic violence so that they're best suited and able to get out of that violent situation. Then it goes into the court system, and like I mentioned, the IDET program is overseen by corrections staff, where they are actually supervising these high-risk offenders and offering services to, and also staying in touch with the victims.
Thank you. And then from the legal side, obviously, once you screen into the IDAP program, right away, as soon as you're arrested, maybe first appearance in court, once you screen into that, if you're appropriate, counseling is, you're put right into counseling, et cetera. And we have shortened the time from a court appearance from anywhere from 12 to 16 months to 53 days. So we have found that the quicker you address the problem, the more success you're going to have. So it's been a tremendous success. I applaud everyone who's involved in that program, and obviously the Department of Justice at the federal level has understood what a valuable tool working together is. And of course, as we all know, that doesn't always happen in other jurisdictions, but it does in this one. And I'm very, very thankful to say we have reduced the number of domestic homicides by well over half of what's going on. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that attention to, obviously, I know the chiefs know about law enforcement as well. But those elected officials, I think, should be aware of it, of what your law enforcement agencies are doing to curb a very real and very deadly problem. And not only are we stopping those two, you're also teaching the kids this is not the right thing to do. And that's the thing, because if they learn the wrong thing, they're going to repeat it, and we all know it, because we've seen generations come back, right? Time and time again. Anyway, thank you, Captain, for that. I appreciate it. Anything else come before the body? Hearing none, I think declare us adjourned. Thank you for coming. The next meeting is